Hi, this is Uncle Matt's D&D Studio. I'm Matt Finch, and if you play Dungeons & Dragons, and especially old school Dungeons & Dragons, please hit the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel, and now we'll move on to the video.
Okay, I'm Matt Finch, and I'm here talking to Eric Tenkar, and probably nobody in the old school Renaissance is unfamiliar with Eric, since he runs what's probably the largest social hub for the OSR over at Tenkar's Tavern. Tenkar is, first, Eric is spelled with a K, and so is Tenkar. So we'll get that out of the way right away. So Eric, let's. You know that I run conversations, not interviews, so I just get things started, and then we go wherever we go.
Which is like the cat running in front of the screen.
Yeah, no, I mean that's excellent, because gives a sense of reality to everything. So I've got the dog door open over here, so we may get to see my 150-pound dog come and try and tackle me halfway through the conversation.
Nice.
Let's just start with the beginning of Tenkar's Tavern and talk about that. Talk about the beginning, what you were trying to do, and so on, and then we'll see where we get to from there.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I don't know if I really knew what I wanted to do with it when I started it. 2008, I put up a blog post, and I didn't come back for another year, which probably isn't the way most success stories start. And when I came back in 2009, I was going to be writing about role-playing games and technology, like the Kindle that was first coming out. And I had no aim and no focus and no readership, really.
One of the things I've noticed about an awful lot of the OSR blogs is that they mutated from one thing to another. Most people started out thinking, I'm just going to sort of give my thoughts about role-playing games, and then they tended to become different things. And some of them sort of turned theoretical, and a lot of them turned into stuff like, here are resources for monsters. And then, and in your case, you really became sort of a social place where people just come in and tend to chat, even though it was a blog format and not really designed for people talking.
Right. And that I think grew from the fact that although I started doing product reviews, I also started doing Kickstarter reviews. And I think the Kickstarter reviews really drove a lot of conversation, because when people were investing money and stuff, they wanted to know what was going on with it. And I was, at the time, like the only one who was keeping track of the gaming Kickstarters.
Yeah, and I think, that was also, it was like Kickstarter had begun, and then after it had begun, people started, you sort of got a second generation of people on Kickstarter who really didn't know what they were doing, and there were several that failed or faltered in some way, and that seemed to be sort of when you came in, so it was exciting to watch you rant a little bit.
Yeah, actually, back then, I actually did, I think, a twice-a-month update of all the Kickstarters that I had backed and where they were and how late they were, and I was color-coding it. And I'm going to assume that Rach won't be listening to this, but I think I've backed over 300 Kickstarters. So for me to...
You better hope, Rachel, it doesn't come and watch this one.
Yeah, no. It has certainly... it's hard to talk about stuff. Come on, Kat. Of all the places you need to be, this is not the place you need to be. But it's hard to talk about something if you're not going to actually be involved in the process. When it comes to Kickstarters, generally speaking, if I'm writing about it, if I'm talking highly of it or saying this looks like really interesting, I'm backing it. I'm not going to talk something up if I'm not going to put my money behind it. I got lucky. I didn't back any of Ken Whitman stuff, but that hasn't kept him off my radar. But that was just pure luck.
It probably hasn't kept you off his radar too. I think he's not very happy with you.
No, that's okay. That's okay. There's a few Kickstarter creators that aren't, but I also get emails multiple times a week from Kickstarter creators that want me to boost their signal, and for the most part, I ignore that because I'm not here to boost their signal. I'm here to take care of, I don't want to say my audience, but my community. I want to keep it all. Honest is the wrong word. Well, maybe it isn't the wrong word. Maybe it is the right word. I want to keep the community. See, I've been accused of being the Kickstarter police, and based upon my previous career, I can understand that. But
yeah, this is what you get for being a detective sergeant. That's the right rank, right? A detective sergeant in the New York force is the.
And I left from internal affairs. That was my last assignment. So I really believe that the integrity of our community is something that we have to police ourselves. Nobody outside is going to come along and make sure that the handful of bad apples don't spoil the bushel for everybody else. And that can happen. When it comes to Kickstarters, I read it online. I read it on and even my community or on the blog on the Tenkar's Tavern. When you talk about Kickstarters, like, oh no, I'm not backing any because I've seen so many go late. Out of the number of Kickstarters there are, the numbers that have actually funded and failed to produce are extremely small. But if you don't keep the fire to people like that, it's an infection that could spread.
Yeah, I think people are probably aware, that you're out there, and at this point there are other, people out there not necessarily running blogs, but who will comment on Facebook and stuff about, people who've either done repeated failures to deliver on a Kickstarter, or people who have a Kickstarter where the goals and things are unrealistic enough that it can it sends up warning signs. And that's something that you've brought up as well, taking a look at Kickstarters that are actually in process.
Yeah, and I've actually had creators reach out to me with their Kickstarters not released yet, asking me to look it over. If I see any flags, if I see any issues, and I don't have a problem doing that. Again, a Kickstarter that is for our community, that is going to give a product that we're going to enjoy. I'd like to see it succeed. I'd like to see it succeed without issues. And the best way to do that is to vet it before it actually goes live.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think a lot of Kickstarters fail. Absolutely not because people are expecting it to fail. It's just that they don't really understand what the economics behind it look like, and so on and so forth. Now, you talked about our community, and you are one of the people who are really at the center of that community, whether people like you or not. And there are definitely people who don't like you.
Oh God, yes.
So tell me how you sort of mentally think of who that community is. What is that community?
The community that it's strange, because when I was an active cop, being an active cop is you're part of a community that is, whether you like a person personally or not, when the chips are down, when there's an illness in the family or somebody's in need, everybody steps up. And I see the old school gaming community to be something very similar. When we have people in our community, people step up if they're in need. It's a wonderful thing to see. All I do is add bandwidth to the message that is already making its own rounds. So when there are GoFundMe's or there's medical issues for people, even with Chuck Wright.
That was a good example. The community really stepped up for Chuck when he lost his leg. That was very, very heartening to see.
And I'm not the person that's usually taking the lead of it. I'm usually finding out about this stuff after it's already started. All I'm doing is taking my soapbox, which is one of the taller soapboxes in our community, and getting up there and spreading the word.
And then you've got the organization too of Tenkar's Tavern has shifted over time. Although right at the beginning you did have the blog roll.
Yes.
And that was sort of at the same time. And I was running a blog that I completely failed to keep going. I mean, one of your things is just the stamina of keeping the thing going. But you and I had blog rolls, and Grognardia also had a blog roll, and those three right at that time were places where people would come and find where the old school resources are. And then yours, though, has begun to branch out. It's not just the static blog roll, you've also got a Discord channel that
I've got
is
a Discord
direct
channel.
real-time talk, sort of peer-to-peer. So now, Tenkar's Tavern has expanded from just being you plus comments into being people who originally would have been talking in the comments, and now they're able to talk real-time and access you as well and especially with the Tavern chat.
Right. Well, we started Tavern Chat, and I say we because if it's just me yapping, then you don't have anything. But we started Tavern Chat, I think, 3.5, 4 years ago, using a chat wing, which was just a little text way to communicate on the tavern. It was a little little app, and
It was terrible. It was terrible too. By the way.
Yeah, I know it was hard, but we still had nights where 20 people would jump in for a wacky text marathon. Once I found Discord, once I went to Discord and we made it a voice chat, it's been likened. I think the best thing I heard it was likened to. It's like listening to a gaming podcast live, participating, and being thankful that nobody's recording it.
Yeah, that last one's probably pretty key.
Yeah, and it's true because people really get to relax. People in the industry, it's like North Texas in some way. In some ways, I've seen deals get made for. Oh, okay, you need an editor? We'll talk offline. It's a beautiful thing to see that. Now, Discord's been added. The Facebook community's been added. It's all things to allow the community to interact with each other. It's nothing if it's just me, because believe me, my voice, I listen to it all the time. You can only listen to so much of it, whether it's me posting or whatnot. It's the community interacting with each other, with me, that makes it a success.
Well, we're all also watching to see whether you ever piss off Rachel. Anybody who hasn't met her, she's a very formidable lady, and so there's always. It's kind of like watching NASCAR, where there's the chance that somebody's gonna, go off the rails. We're all watching to see if that happens.
Yeah, no, I've been pretty blessed. I do know what will set her off, and I do try to avoid that very, very strongly. But she's been actually, you know what? The blog wouldn't exist if it wasn't for Rach, because she was the one that really pushed me to get back into gaming. She pushed me to, when I thought about doing the blog, to actually do it, and would remind me in the beginning, when was the last time you posted? I'm like, 3 days ago. Well, you better post again. People are going to be looking for it. I'm like, no, they're not. Nobody's reading it. And now I post 2 or 3 times a day usually. But
and is that room that you're sitting in where all the magic happens? That's so people can picture exactly where it is that you're typing your Kickstarter rants and so on.
Yes, this is where all the magic happens. As my cat Ashley, have you seen her go back and forth numerous times already? She has her blanket to my left. It's an L-shaped desk with a Keurig and a mini fridge underneath it. And the room to my left is connected not by a doorway, but by an archway. So that's where our dachshund, Donka, who's been heard on many a podcast that I participated in, whenever she hears Glenn Hallstrom's voice, she's like, rah, rah, rah. So.
And Glenn has one of those radio voices where it's like really, really distinct.
Yes, and again, somehow it travels through the headphones. It is Glenn that she reacts to. It is hilarious, but yeah.
So also, okay, so we've talked about a few things. You mentioned there's the Tenkar's Tavern Facebook page. There's the Tenkar's Tavern Discord, which is sort of faster paced, and nobody leaving any printed record of what they said. And then there's your blog, which is probably the flagship of it, because that's where people are seeing the sort of considered opinions, to the extent that you consider your opinions, showing up. And then you just mentioned podcasts. So talk about podcasts too.
Okay, I've been involved in podcasting off and on now for a lot longer than I ever expected I would be. I never really thought I was going to be a podcaster. I have a New York accent, and that generally doesn't translate too well to podcasts.
I don't know. I think people with distinctive voices and stuff are good on podcasts because you know who's talking.
I guess, but I was podcasting a lot with Vince Florio, and people would get confused because Vince is a native New Yorker from Long Island, and they'd be like, Tom, I can't tell you two apart. I'm like, Really? Okay. Didn't know we sounded that much alike. But yeah, I've podcasted with Vince. We did the Brainstorm podcast. We did short-lived one for Faraway Land. We did Save or Die for a bit. Me, James Spahn, Glenn Hallstrom. And then me, James, and Glenn have our own podcast, The Heroes Brew, which is maybe coming out once every 6 weeks at this point. We've been pretty slow. It's always been one out of the three of us who have some kind of emergency that's been bumping us back each time.
Also, when we're done, would you message me with links for all of those? Because what I'll do is I'll put them in the description.
Oh, sure.
Of the video, and then also onto Old School Gamer Radio, which we're sort of in a funny moment because we're recording this a few hours before we do the great big launch stuff on a bunch of different big announcements of the the Swords of Jordan game, and the Old School Gamer Radio website is going to get launched, and we're going to give the link to the Patreon for the game and all of this stuff. So by the time people watch this video, that will have happened. But at the time we're making the video, it hasn't happened yet.
Well, then I'll have the links in time for you to already have them up on the site. So when we talk about it, it'll already be there waiting for them.
Yeah, we have to remember that we're time traveling at this point.
And having seen the website in the brief moments when it was live and I was allowed to peek and play with it, I'm extremely excited. This is really, really good stuff.
Yeah, I think it's going to go really well. We'll see how it all comes out. I mean, we're doing a live stream without too much warning, so I think it's going to be something that sort of slow rolls out. But we'll see. I mean, it may have blown up, into something big by the time we're talking, or it may have fallen flat. We'll see.
Oh no, it's certainly not going to fall flat. And I'll be honest with you, it's something that is certainly needed because while there are a few bloggers that are still like myself consistently out there doing it, blogging has taken a transformation. There are less bloggers. There are more people live streaming or doing videos. There are people that are just doing Google Plus for their communications of when it comes to gaming. So it's being spread, and having a site where people can go and, like a Chinese food menu, go, oh my God, look at all these choices. I'll take one from column A and one from column B. That is an awesome thing. I think it's really great for the community.
Yeah, I think it's going to help a lot because, I mean, the thing is, right, like I said, well, it's sort of network theory, and I'll probably talk about this a little bit on the live stream that will already have happened now, but
in our time it hasn't yet. Okay.
Right, exactly. So what am I trying to say? Okay, so on the sort of network theory thing, which is partly where this started from, and I've got a background in cognitive science from way back in college, and so I know a little bit about network theory. And the thing is that when you look structurally at the information flow in the old school Renaissance right now, there's one hub, which is Tenkar's Tavern, and then there are lots of spokes that go out. And the thing is that Tenkar's Tavern is predominantly a social hub, but what we don't have is a content hub. And so that is one of the goals of Old School Gamer Radio, is to have a second hub in the OSR, so that people have got the social one and then the content one. And then what should happen, according to the theory of how it works, is that you get a snowball effect where both of those two hubs, because they're connected by spokes, will begin to have more traffic and more sophisticated traffic, and they also will be able to handle more spokes coming out from those two hubs. Because right now, Tenkar's Tavern does connect to a lot of blogs, but the way that it brings up connections to other places in the OSR is largely through your posts, and so those don't hang there for very long. Whereas in a content hub, we're going to lose a lot of the social aspect to it, because a lot of it's just going to be an aggregator site, and then there's going to be the third thing of the YouTube channel feeding content into it. But it's really about what's out there, as opposed to, hey, how you doing today?
Right. No, and That's also it. Listen, I think that the OSR has. I think the best thing that happened to the OSR in the last 5 years is 5e. I think it's brought a lot of people back to gaming, people into gaming, and some of them want something that's a little bit less complicated, and they're going to come to the OSR. But at the same time, they aren't as far apart as 3 and 4e or Pathfinder are to the OSR. So I really think the OSR is going to have a very strong 2018, 2019. I could be wrong.
I think so. I mean, one of the another one of the things. I mean, there are so many components that came into this idea, but I think in some ways the OSR is going to have an identity crisis because there are an awful lot of people who are moving to 5th edition, and so it's going to potentially widow a lot of the people in the OSR who play. They've got an actual copy of the old game, and they're
Right.
playing from that. And I think there's the risk that they're going to be widowed, and at the same time, I've got the goal of reaching out to the 5th edition players and saying, hey, here is this old school gaming style that's out there that you may not be familiar with. And there's a lot more overlap because like you said, the difference between the older systems and 3rd edition was huge.
Right.
And on the other hand, now with 5th edition, it can actually be played, using some old school gaming principles. And so a lot of the lines I think are about to become very, very fuzzy or have become very fuzzy. And that's one of the things that I want to get in there and be like, look, there is a Venn diagram here. And, you've got your traditional old schoolers, but here you've got some overlap between
Right.
those ideas and 5th edition, and then you've got the group who simply don't want to play, old school style because they like more granular and so on and so forth. But, trying to capture some of the 5th edition players and say, look, you've got a group of people here in the OSR where you've actually, in some cases, got more in common with that group than you do with the people who are playing a different style of gaming with 5th edition. And that's something that I think we have to navigate. And I think it's going to be a difficult navigation. And so again, Old School Gamer Radio, I'm trying to, I'm doing a lot more 5th edition stuff, at least with the channel, not so much with Old School Gamer Radio, but trying to establish some of that middle ground.
No, and I don't blame. And there are people like Wenger builds a lot of his stuff as O5R because it's like old school, but he's taking some of the stuff from 5th edition and mixing it together. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all. I do like I said, there's more synergy between the OSR and 5e than there certainly was between the OSR and Pathfinder or 4e.
Yeah, that's really one that people just choose not to speak of.
Yeah, it's easier. But
okay, so I think we hit a pause right there in the conversation. Do we need?
4e just does that to you. I know.
Yeah, I know. So I mean, we could talk about Wenger because you can always talk about Wenger, but maybe best not to just talk about any individuals on here, especially for those who don't know who he is. But
right. He's one of the personalities in old school gaming.
Yeah, definitely one of the personalities.
And that's the one thing about I might be a hub or a large hub or the largest hub, but there are smaller hubs out there. It isn't just Google Plus has the creative aspect, and if you want to call it that, of the OSR. It's a lot of do-it-yourself home brewing. That's very active on G+. Wenger has his own hub. Dyson is a hub unto himself. We also there's spokes interact or connect, but they are their own. There are many communities within the one.
Yeah, well, I mean, I totally agree with that, but here's my thinking on it. What you're listing is people who, because of the form of social media pushes people to become a personality with followers. It does not push you to have links to other people like you. It's all built for people to become personalities. That's the structure. And so even though, you're mentioning people who are very popular, I don't think that, I think, and it's not them that's the issue. It's the sea in which they're swimming. causes them not to have this broad lateral, peer-to-peer thing. And that's why the tavern is not a hub because you're popular. It's a hub because it's structured in a way that links to several different media types: Discord, Facebook, to a certain degree G+. That's kind of hard to link to. Then the blog posts, and so it's like people come to Tenkar's Tavern many times not for the content, but to see what else is going on out there. And that's what I'm calling a hub, and that's why I think a lot of the people that are out there, I mean, we're not, there are people out there, who are more significant, than you or me or, but the thing is that where they are sitting is not designed to be a connection point, whereas the tavern is. And so that's what I mean when I talk about a hub. I'm not saying, hey, Eric, you're the biggest personality out there. I'm saying that there's a particular structure in the network of communications that Tenkar's Tavern sits in, and that very, very few other places do.
Well, part of that was once I realized that the tavern itself was well-read and had a following for the blog side, I realized that I needed a community where people could actually not just talk on my posts, but talk to each other and share their own stuff. And that's how the Facebook community came about 2 years ago. We hit over 2,000 people in those 2 years. I'm actually very excited about that because it allows the community to exist without me and my input. The community has its own life, it has its own vibrancy. And I'm just a caretaker in a lot of ways, and I prefer it that way.
Well, I think it's not you. I mean, it's not just that you're caretaker. I think you also set a tone.
Okay. All right, I'll take that.
Yeah, you should, because I'm right about so many things.
But and Discord was striking lightning in a bottle. It was. But immediately embraced, and I'm sure if I ran chats every night with voice, there would be a dozen people at least every night. Very happy to tell stories and share gaming thoughts and whatever else because it's unscripted. But I'd have no life if I did that, so that's why it's once a week.
Yeah, that's it's we all have had a chance to see the cat out of your family, and we've
yes. And
you're, a grandparent now, so
well,
I can make fun of you for that.
No, I'm an uncle. I'm an uncle of a 7-year-old niece, who, by the way, and I told her over the weekend that I was being interviewed. And I said, "Do you know what about?" She goes, "Yes." I go, "What? Gaming?" I'm like, "All right." She goes, "I want to be the first to see it." I'm like, "Well, I don't think it works that way." Second, I'm like, "I'll make sure your mother gets the link when it goes live."
It's gonna and it will go live. I forget when. I think I've got it scheduled. Actually, I've got it scheduled for Monday.
Cool.
I think to go out. So because I'm trying to do one on Monday and one on Friday, and I'm probably gonna start kind of increasing the frequency on that. But the interviews are the most popular so far of stuff that's on the channel, and I am very excited to see whether you're able to beat the Jim Radji interview.
Listen, I don't think very much can beat the Jim Radji interview. Nothing much can beat Jim Radji. The first time I spoke with him, I don't know how he did it. My gaming group was we were gaming late on a Saturday night into a Sunday morning, and I guess the hangout was open. And Radji dropped in at 1:30 in the morning, and we didn't end the conversation until about 4:30. This goes back a couple of years. James is a good interviewer. He's a good person to talk with. Entertaining as all heck. And I still have his semi-naked picture where he's laying out on his bed.
That was so hilarious. That picture.
I can't get rid of that image. Always whenever I think of James, that image always comes back. And
it's one of those things you can't unsee that.
No, you can't. Kind of like James Bond walking up behind Frank Metzner and giving me the at North Texas. And I was just like, that's an image that I can't unsee, and thankfully Frank didn't see it because his back was to it. But yes, it was timing is everything, I guess.
everybody's got great North Texas story. It's just really hilarious when people I mean, the thing about North Texas for people who are watching is that they have a very good proportion of special guests to visitors, and so you've got famous people wandering around all over the place, and so there are lots and lots of accidental interactions where people are talking to somebody who they may be a total fanboy of, but they don't know that it's this person that they're talking to, and so a lot of people have funny stories.
Yeah, the atmosphere at North Texas. I went to my first GaryCon and my first game hole this year. Both were a lot of fun. I had a great time at both. But North Texas is a con unto itself. It just has a certain magical flavor to it that it just can't be beat.
Yeah, it really does. One of my huge faux pas at North Texas was I had never seen a picture of Rob Kuntz. It's like I know who he is,
right.
Major, creative author, but I'd never seen a picture of him. And so he came up this is probably the first or the second. I think it was the second one. And he says, Matt Finch, I'm pleased to meet you. And so I said, I'm pleased to meet you too. You are.
That is awesome.
It was terrible.
No, but that is an awesome story. It might have been terrible at the time.
It was terrible at the time. I guess most good stories are terrible at the time. But.
Well, that's my North Texas story where I was bidding on Coca-Cola dice. This Coca-Cola is the wood that the old nightsticks used to be made out of for the New York City cops in the 50s and 60s. And they made a nice little sound when they hit an object. I'm bidding on these dice, and I'm not really paying attention initially to who keeps on bidding against. And I'm like, and Frank Metzner is running the auction, and then he mentioned well, it looks like Bill Webb's son has deep pockets, and I went, I'm bidding against Bill's kid. Oh my God, I'm out of my mind. So finally I bowed out, and Frank's like, Tenkar, you're going to let a 12-year-old outbid you on? I'm like, yeah, I can't outbid Bill. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, really. It's not the 10-year-old's pockets that are the issue there.
Yeah, no, it's Bill, so I let the dice go. But yeah, that was.
I saw a hilarious auction thing. This one was actually a game hole, I think, but two of the really rich guys, who collect the shrink wrapped stuff and all of that. And there was one of the wood grain sets up for sale, and one guy who was there, and he'd been hanging out with us for a lot. He's bidding, but one of the guys at the back who totally does not need another wood grain OD&D box. He's got like 10. He's bidding from the back of the room, and the guy up at the front, who also doesn't particularly need one, but I guess he's got fewer of them, just looks back and they all know each other. So he shoots this nasty look at the guy in the back because it was like socially unacceptable or something that he'd be bidding against him. So
that's awesome. And I could pretty much guess the names involved.
Yeah, you probably can. Well, I mean, you would certainly recognize the names involved. I won't, since it's about an auction, I won't say it.
Right. No, I mean, neither am I. But I'm pretty sure. But no, yeah. And that's the great thing too. But I spent a lot of time out of the hobby. I mean, when I was in high school and college, gamed actively, and I've found, to my experience, that most gaming groups tend to have one personality or one person that if they drop out of the group tends to fade away. A lot of groups just seem to have that. I know mine did. It wound up being me, because once I went into the police academy and no longer was off weekends, March of re-entry was the last time I gamed for about 10 years before I found Fantasy Grounds. And that was my slow re-entry into the hobby. And then finding the OSR, where I found Castles and Crusades, and then Osric and Labyrinth Lord and Swords and Wizardry, and realized that this is what I wanted to play. Well, certainly not something like 3E or Castles and Crusades was great until I found Osric, and I was like, oh, this is like 1E, but written better.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. I was like, and there's no weapon speeds. There's no armor AC adjustment for weapon. I like this. This works.
And
this
then
is how I
now
played it.
you said something really interesting there. I don't think I've heard of anybody else who came back into gaming through virtual tabletops. There may be a lot of people, but in the OSR, I have not run into somebody where that was the avenue. I mean, for most people, it was like they're playing some sort of third edition game, or either
Right.
they've been playing the whole time,
Right.
but those guys sort of aren't really part of a renaissance because they were doing it the whole time. But a lot of people who were playing third edition and suddenly had this epiphany of, you know what, it's the rules that aren't working for me. I need to go back and look at something. I've never heard somebody say that it was because of a virtual tabletop.
Well, when I wasn't gaming, I was still collecting. So I was buying not necessarily the rules, but I was still buying the latest Forgotten Realms hardcover because I liked the setting and I liked the fluff, the fiction. But I wanted to get back into gaming, but as a police officer, my social circles, there are cops that game. I've found it out, but they are few, and they tend to be too embarrassed to admit that they're a gamer to the people around them. So it's not macho. So you don't know that in your social circles where the gamers are. But I found Fantasy Grounds, and I bought the license. I actually had bought the licenses to Screen Monkey and Klug and others. But I found Fantasy Grounds, and as a player, it was awesome. It was a virtual table with virtual dice, and the first group I found was playing Warhammer, and then Warhammer 40K Dark Heresy, and I was able to get into a weekly Saturday night game. No voice; it was all text in the thing. Then I got into a Castles and Crusades game. And that got me so freaking excited. But I couldn't run a game with Fantasy Grounds. I could play. Still couldn't run it. I like to use a lot of homebrewed stuff, or even if I'm using stuff that is published, I like to change stuff around. And Fantasy Grounds, you had to plug everything in with kind of like computer code. And I didn't have the mindset to get into that.
There are a lot of people who are interested in virtual tabletops, and I think that there are two big ones right now. Is what is it? Roll20 is the other one.
Roll20.
So there's Roll20 and Fantasy Grounds, and I think there are a lot of people suddenly starting to look at those. And so, tell me, because I have not explored some of this. Tell me what Fantasy Grounds is.
Well, Fantasy Grounds
in terms of playing old school stuff.
In terms of playing old school stuff. That was the other issue. The reason why I stepped away from Fantasy Grounds, especially when Roll20 came out, is Fantasy Grounds is great if you have a rule set written specifically for the software. So if you were playing Castles and Crusades, there's a professional rule set. It has all the rules will be part of the app on your screen, your character sheets, everything. It's beautiful. We didn't have it for old school rules like Labyrinth Lord or Osric or Swords and Wizardry when I was really getting my teeth anxious to get back into gaming full on. And then D&D Next came out, playtest, and I got an invite to the Friends and Family pretty early on. And a friend of ours ran it, and although the playtest aspect of it burned us all out, and that's probably the nature of playtesting, a rule set that's constantly changing, we formed a good group.
Yeah, playtesters are people who are simply tossed into the fire to see what comes out.
Yes, and that was that was rough, and our GM was like, I'm willing to play, but I'm not, I got to take time away from gaming, so as a DM. So I picked up, and I believe I ran Axe, Adventurer Conqueror King system. which is pretty much a very house ruled Labyrinth Lord or BX. And we had a great time. And the first time I had DM'd in over 10, maybe 12 years at that point, and I had a blast doing it. And I liked the Roll20 virtual tabletop because I didn't have to plug anything in. Roll20, oh my God, it must be about 2 years ago. They reached out to me because they knew I had posted about running games, and they wanted me to record it and do an interview on there. And I had to tell them flat out, I said, listen, I am a minimalist. Just like an old school gaming, a lot of times is minimalist gaming. I said, all I use with Roll20 is I take whatever map I'm going to use, I put a fog of war on it so then I can reveal what the players are traveling through and seeing, and I use it for dice rolls. That's all I use it for. I don't use tokens. I don't use line of sight. I don't use character sheet. Minimalist because it's what felt like my old school gaming when I was playing at a regular table. And it's still how I run it. So, and I've been doing that for a number of years now.
Now, one of the things that will have, whoa, sorry, I kicked my desk there. So one of the things that's going to be coming out in the announcement that we make this afternoon is going to be about my online game. And what I'm doing in my online game is I'm using miniatures, but moving the camera through at the level of the miniatures. So you're sort of seeing it at the miniatures eye view of what goes on. And I've discovered it's a lot of fun, but I did discover that it takes away to a degree from your ability to actually do the DMing. I think I'm going to get a lot better at it, once I'm not having to think about it every second. But that's one of the things that has sort of kept me away from trying a virtual tabletop, is that I'm thinking to myself, if I'm trying to DM on one of these things, I'm going to be so distracted by what I have to manage in this computer program that I'm going to not be doing a very good job at the DMing.
Well, you see, for me, when I get GM'd as, kid, teen, young adult, whatever, it was always theater of the mind. If we had miniatures, it was for marching order only. Maybe I scratched some things out, and if it's a big combat, it's where things are on a sheet of paper. But for the most part, it was theater of the mind. When I use Roll20, I might be revealing the room, but I'll use a pointer to say, well, this is where your enemies are in the upper right corner of this room. Dink. I'm not putting a counter out. And what are you guys doing? And then we just go from there. And most old school gaming, if there's a disagreement as to where somebody is or how they're doing whatever they're doing, we talked it out. Tokens, to me, I learned from Fantasy Grounds, the problem with tokens as a player was all you need is one player in a group of 5 to forget to move their token. They're still active. They're still playing, but they're just not thinking of moving their token. And now you have a token that's off screen that now the DM is trying to find the token to bring it over. Why? Like I said, miniatures to me were always just a visual asset for marching order. It never detailed the combat. We just didn't need it. So I still don't need it. I still don't use it. And most people I playing games with aren't too heavy on the tokens either. But that being said, do I like them? Do I think they're pretty? Yes. Do I own a digital library of probably 1,000 tokens? Yeah. Maybe I'll get to use them one day.
You do? So you went ahead and you bought the tokens even though you don't use them?
Oh, I bought some, and using map tools, you can make your own tokens. So I've done that from art from various books that I've owned.
You made your own tokens. You made your own tokens,
yes, and
even though you don't use them.
Even though I don't use them.
I'm just trying to make sure I understand what you're saying properly.
Because I always thought that I would use them, and I have tried to use them, and I just don't. But I have them if I need them.
I heard somebody say one time that in terms of modules and rule books and things like that, that a lot of times when people buy them, they're not necessarily buying them because they think they're going to play them. They're buying them for the illusion that they will one day have the free time to play them.
You know what? That's probably accurate to a large extent, although I do find myself very happily stealing like an encounter from a 64-page module and just ripping it out and totally reworking it and then putting it where I want it in my current adventure. I've been known to do that. So yeah, it's a lot of source material that, but there's very little that I run as is, because when I've run stuff as written, usually what happens is my players rebel and revolt because it's, too static or just too, I don't want to say railroady, but if you're writing a commercial adventure, there's a certain expected path that you're writing for, because you can't write for every possibility. As a GM, I can figure out where my players might go, and if they go off the rails, that's fine. But if you stick to things that's written, a lot of times you're stuck with the material, and that can be limiting.
Yeah, unless you know the module so well that you can extrapolate. And I think that's
Right.
one of the reasons why a lot of people like whatever module they started with, with their box set. Like, so B1, In Search of the Unknown, and
Right.
B2, Keep on the Borderlands. A lot of people like those more, and I think part of that reason is that they know the module. They learned the modules so well, because it was like the first thing. It was like, oh my God, this is how this works. And so they learned the modules so well that they can riff on those modules if they're playing them, where they couldn't do that with one that they didn't, study word by word.
Well, you see, like I came in with AD&D, and I had the player's handbook in the DMG and a set of dice, because that's what my mother got me for my birthday. So I had only the little sample dungeon in the DM's guide as a sample of how. So I just drew my own. I designed my own. You had a dragon in a 10x10 room. You had a dragon in a 10x10 room. It's just what happened.
I had a dragon in a 10x10 room. I put it in. It was in B1, Search of the Unknown, where they've got the little gaps where they say write your monster in there. I wrote I was 10. I wrote my monster in there.
Well, and see, like my players didn't really have a problem for the first 3 months when I was running, because I didn't realize I had to take the monsters out of the back of the DMG, and it doesn't explain what hit dice are. So I thought hit dice were hit points. So an ogre with 4+1, why would they write it 4+1? Just say 5 hit points. So all my monsters were incredibly weak when it came to the amount of hit points they had.
My big one was that we didn't read or figure out the experience point system. So we played a little bit, and then we said, you figure that we've got an experience point now? And then we leveled up when we had one.
Yeah. I did that for a while. Every adventure is a new level. I'm like, oh, damn.
In my defense, I should say that was using the Holmes Basic set, not the player's handbook and stuff. So
okay, well, it's defendable. No, everybody has the stories of when they first, like for me, my first session was my friend Kenny, who only had the DMG, running me through a small dungeon where I just fought skeletons, and then he had to call a friend who had the player's handbook to see if my fighter leveled.
Excellent. So I started probably a year or 2 years before you, because I was in a generation that had the player's handbook, we had the home set, we did not have the DMG yet because it wasn't
okay.
out. So we didn't have the saving throw numbers. There are some pieces in there, the way that those books were structured, that you really needed, and so we had to go back to the OD&D books to find out some of the stuff that would eventually be in the DMG. And so we were playing usually across 3 systems, OD&D, and then the Holmes Basic set, and then a player's handbook and a monster manual, which were both, awesome books. But
no, those were the times, man. Those were, I have those memories of my first couple of game sessions are just burned into my head.
I remember we were going into one, and it was like the first or second dungeon, or it was the first one in the player's handbook or something. And I remember it was the first one in the player's handbook, because I was looking at the equipment list, and I was like, Wolfsbane. We might run into werewolves.
There you go.
Better have some Wolfsbane.
Yeah. See, those are the good days. It's funny too, because I like to think of it as like, well, AD&D, we ran it by the book. We never ran it by the book. We didn't understand. So weapon speed made no sense to any of us. We ignored it. I think a lot of stuff in AD&D got ignored. for
Oh
most
yeah,
groups.
I think so. I think so too. I mean, when you look at the complete version of Swords and Wizardry, which is basically where things stood right before that sudden switch over to AD&D, I think is actually a lot more like the way we played than actual first edition AD&D.
Oh, I believe that immensely. I think I even say that on the blog where I talk about Swords and Wizardry. It's on the side column. Swords and Wizardry complete played like we played AD&D, and we never had experience playing basic or expert. We came in with AD&D, but we immediately cut out the stuff that made it too complicated for us.
Yeah, I think and I think the people who started without the DMG tended not to build in the detail that didn't work because we already had like a running structure for the way.
Right. So I guess everybody was kit bashing and home brewing even back then.
Yep. Oh, definitely. All right, are we winding down?
We could be.
I'm starting to run out of stuff to say now.
Well, yeah, listen, I'm going to throw in one quick thing. I owe you a debt because when I
no, don't do that. Don't do that.
No, shush. No, and I do. I owe you a debt because your Swords and Wizardry rules are what I was able to do Swords and Wizardry light off of. That was my project when I was newly retired, and it gave me a focus that I really needed, because when you newly retired, the idea of I'm retired, I got nothing to do, and it becomes I'm retired, I got nothing to do. Listen, it was great, and you and Bill having the faith, and Zach being the focus. I can't thank you all enough, man. It came out beautifulally.
Okay, so we're done. We're done with the compliments because I can't handle compliments. I never know what to do with compliments. So we will
just nod your head and say thank you.
Thank you.
There you go.
And then we will. Oh damn it! I had something else I was gonna say.
Sure.
And I totally forgotten what it was. What was it?
I couldn't tell you.
We talked about conventions. We talked about where Tenkar's Tavern ends up in network theory, and we talked about the back in the day, and talked about minimalist gaming. We talked about virtual tabletops, and you're gonna. I think that maybe you have enough material here to beat that Jim Raggi video.
Again, it is Raggi. And there's something about like. Now it's funny because James writes some of the best written adventures, best presented adventures that I could never actually run, because most of them would kill my party and then I'd have no group left. But reading them it's like reading a modern tome of horrors, where just reading it is an entertainment unto itself. His
I like that's one of the ways I read a lot of modules and stuff. I mean, I really don't rip stuff out of modules for the most part, like a lot of people do, but I enjoy reading them.
Right. James' stuff goes to another level for the most part. I mean, their entertainment value as something to read and imagine how you'd kill your party is second to none. I don't have the heart to kill my party more than once a year.
Just once a year, huh?
Once a year. Do
you have like a specific date that every
year
you kill?
No. Actually, I was surprised when I was putting them to the lost city of Baracus, and it was just over the summertime, and they encountered the dungeon in the dragon in the caverns, and the drow, and the drow incident went bad when they spoke aloud about how we'll use the drow as allies and then we're going to kill the drow. They didn't, it wasn't out of character. It was talking out loud, so needless to say the drow attacked. But they killed the drow and they drove off the dragon and only lost all but 2 party members. So 2 party members survived to collect the dragon's hoard.
That's not bad. I have had a situation in which one person survived and got the dragon hoard. That was at one of the conventions in North Texas again. All right, so since we're slowing down, let's go ahead and we'll draw it to a close with the question of what is your position on gnomes?
You see, I actually like gnomes.
Okay, so you're in the
Yeah, and I think they should be added to swords and wizardry, and I think that you should tell Zach that since is or was a lesser gnome, it should be his responsibility to add it to the lexicon.
Yeah, he's somehow had difficulty doing that. Getting it into the text every time. It just doesn't seem to show up.
Well, it's what written in invisible ink. It's the gnomish ink. You need to use a little lemon juice to reveal it, and then you'll find
There.
the gnome.
There you go. There you go. That's the thing. All right, everybody. So, Eric, say goodbye to your fans.
Goodbye, folks. Thank you.
I'll say goodbye to mine, and with my sign-off line of no matter what kind of D&D it is that you play, imagine the hell out of it.
Amen.